everybody. My name is Drew, and I'm a psychotherapist here in New York City. And today we are going to talk about the threes. Yes, finally, this is the last number I have to do to complete all 9 numbers. You've been waiting patiently. So have I, actually. I mean, this has been a cool process for me because my second highest number in my life is a 3. That's how I test. So I'm considered a hard 4-wing 3. My 4 is my primary number, but 3 is my second number in command, and it is a double whammy on me. For you, 3-wing 2s, 2-wing 3s, 4-wing 3s, 3-wing 4s, you're double whammied with image. Oh, we are very self-involved, folks. Actually, in the literature of the Enneagram, 4-wing 3s and 3-wing 2s are considered the most tortured number combinations. Why is that? Because they sit right next to each other, and one is bent on authenticity, and one will lie to get people to admire them and want to be seen as successful, and they sit right next to each other. And this happens with the Enneagram. You actually see 6s and 7s sitting next to each other. Both have fear, but one goes after life to conquer that fear, and one can actually pull back from life. You have the 8s and 9s sitting together, the peacemakers, and then they're sitting next to the agitators, the challengers. So 4s and 3s sit right next to each other, and I think I'm pretty skilled in talking about this because my 4-wing 3 is so loud. There's that part of me that says, whatever you do, don't be phony. And then there's this other part that says, be admired for your success. Make sure that people see what you're doing. So there is this really wrestling with, hello world, here I am, but don't look at me, you know? And I want to help you guys understand that a bit. I have a ton of 3s in my life. I have a ton of clients who are 3s. You know, I live in one of the more, how do I say this without sounding like an ass, expensive neighborhoods to live in New York City. There's a lot of wealthy people here. There's a lot of successful people here. There's a lot of people that went to Ivy League schools. At my gym, it's always like Brown, Cornell, Yale, Harvard, Princeton. I went to a rinky-dink school in Pennsylvania, so I have to really find my internal confidence to just go, fuck you guys, I'm here also. But it is no surprise that I ended up in a very 3 area of the world. And I gravitated towards those spots that I felt my confidence by being around other successful people. So we'll get into that too. 4s can bloom late, especially in productivity, and 3s bloom early. But the flip there is 4s get in touch with self-awareness very early. 3s tend to be delayed to self-awareness. So I actually say to 3s when I meet them, especially young 3s, is I hope that you have a lot of moments of crisis before 40. Because 40 is when a lot of 3s start to, especially if they haven't had a lot of crises, start to realize, oh crap, I don't know myself as well as I thought I did. And I've been building a life of productivity and success, but I don't have success in knowing who I am. So we'll get into that too. And when I'm talking to these young 3s, I actually encourage them to look for the moments in which life will throw them curveballs and they get stuck. And they have to go internal, intrinsic, not just extrinsic. And so this is the 101 course of 3s. The 201 course will be the subtypes. Please watch the subtypes. That's where you get to understand a little bit more of what kind of 3 you are. It's 3 different types of 3s, and one doesn't even look like a 3. The counter type looks very different than the other 2s. So you might have been actually testing differently or wrongly for a while. I want you to be thinking about how you grew up. What were the messages you got? What was your family of origins message to you? And did that encourage you to find some kind of identity in a role of successful person that was going to be admired? Our question always is, do I fit in here? And how do I fit? And for 3s, they've often found a way to fit by being successful. That's why many of them are lawyers, doctors, they're in politics and engineering, because in many families, there is an encouragement to do the obvious jobs that are seemingly successful, and those are some of them. In the first half of life, we tend to really lean on our successes. And in the second half of life, we have to actually lean more on who we are at a character level. So I want to push you towards diminishing your stampede towards success and you're striving towards the stars, and actually strive to understand yourself more. We're going to talk a little bit about the obvious things. You guys can get focused on vanity and how your image is, and also your sin or your passion. The thing that you struggle with specifically is deceit. So we're going to talk about that right in the beginning, because a lot of threes would never think that they are liars, but you are in many ways. And we have to get into that. Watch out for how you are aggrandizing your story. The extremes you think are so important that you're building a narrative off of that are actually, just regular life. You've just found a way to make them glimmering for people. So the sacred, the hallowed, the important stuff is in here, and we're going to dig into that. And so hopefully if you're here for that reason, to find out your weaknesses and work on them. So it's going to lean on the side of critiquing you. But I do that in every one of these. I'm not going to just give you all the positives. You already are good at that. So my name is Drew, as I said. This is for all of my friends who are threes, all my clients who are threes, all my family who are threes. And hopefully you out there can just take this in and work through some of your crap and become more whole, more balanced, and rely more on the internal stuff and less on the external validation. If you want to do work with me in the future, get in touch with me on my socials and we can process your crap. And you can also get in touch with me at drewnewkirk.com. And hopefully you go on this journey. It is going to be a long one. I've been compiling information for a while. So if you've got the guts, that's my psychological challenge to you. Reverse psychology. I don't think you have what it takes to watch this whole thing. Please do, because I think that there's a lot of juice in here for you. And then watch the subtypes. That's where the real action happens, where you get to really dig into the intricacies of who you are. Cool? All right, we're going to get into right now deceit and vanity. It is my goal always that you feel seen, known, and understood. So in this time together, we're going to do some psychoeducation, some psychodetectiving, digging deep into the intricacies of how a three works. And some of this is going to hurt pretty badly. And so I love to just open the hood of your soul a bit and tinker with the gadgetries just like a car and be kind of a psycho mechanic and start to understand how the tubes and how the wires and the engines, all these things are working together. And one of the things we have to do is look at this passion or sin right away. And this is a thing that can be really tough for people when they're dealing with the Enneagram. And for threes, it's deceit. So there's 7 deadly sins and we add 2. And the 2 that are added are the 6s, that they're fear, and then the 3s are deceit. They're not in the original 7. And deceit is tricky. If I tell a 3 that they're deceitful or liars or fibbers, they usually push back. They don't really understand how they do that, because 3s aren't naturally liars in a sense. They just twist the truth a bit to make themselves look better. If like a really unhealthy 3, if you're around them, you'll see that they're constantly name dropping. They're constantly kind of telling you their resume and their credentials. And that's for healthy 3s too. I do this myself. My 3 wing, my second, that strong 3. There's times when I'm dropping names, I'm dropping my resume, I'm saying some of the successes I've had, and there is a formulation there that's moving towards vanity. So that's what your fixation is. Your ego fixation is vanity. And this is about your image. And we have to deal with these two things. I don't care that you do it. I just want you to know you're doing it. So I might go, I've been in business partnerships and investment properties where I'll go with my 3 colleague and we'll walk into a property and he'll go, I want to do this, and I'm going to do this, and this. And he'll end up doing 2 of the 10 things. As a 4 who's based on authenticity. I would never say all that and not do it. I'd probably keep from that person the ideas I had, or say, these are ideas, I want to bounce them off of you. Where a 3 might just say, this is what I'm going to do. And then when they don't do it, you go, what the hell was that? Let me even talk to you moms and dads. So throughout this video, I'm going to talk about business, organization, your work. There is so many moms and dads that are 3s. And I want you, when you hear business or organization, to think of yourself and your parenting as a business or an organization. How often do you talk about your kids and their resumes and credentials? How often do you try to slip in how you are parenting well? How creepy up into the back system of your body and in your soul is that part of you that says, I need to perform well in front of other parents? In your religion, your faith, your spirituality, how often are you addicted to the successes of your faith? This is a kind of deceit. The sharing of these successes is trying to woo people in. So the deceit isn't usually obvious. It's not straight lying. It's twisting the truth a little bit to make yourself look better. And I want you to make sure that you're concentrated on when your credentials and resumes are put up first. I won't get into all this. This is just a little bit of a primer, but you have to think creatively about how you deceive and creatively about how your vanity shows up. Your goal needs to move towards truthfulness and authenticity. This is why you sit right next to the 4 on that circle. Because the 4, myself, we're bent on authenticity. When we are not honest, there is a shame that is deep inside of us that comes to the surface, and we feel like we need to say what we did, or we need to say what we were thinking. Where your shame comes out of not being successful enough. You're always pushing to be the best, pushing to win. And therefore, you have to create a narrative in which you were the victor. You get to be on the podium with the gold medal. And so we create a life this way, and this is where I want you to educate yourself psychologically, like we talked about, to be a psycho-detective and do the scrappy work of seeing how you do this. I will not mention deceit or vanity much moving forward, but I will show you through the things you can work on how deception and vanity are playing a role. So when I say go deep into your heart to find your purpose and not just be concentrated on the external, the extrinsic, that's in my way saying, watch out how you deceive yourself. Because the 3, most importantly, deceives themselves. Shelve that you deceive others for a second and think about how you deceive yourself. Whew. Aren't you excited about this? Again, I don't think you're going to get through the whole thing because you're going to feel pretty beat up at the end, but this is all because I think 3s have so much damn potential, me included. It's why I've been working so hard to put these out. My 3 has been on blast because when your heart and your purpose are aligned with your productivity, it is lights out. You will crush. So I hope that is the case for all of you, from parents, from teens, from those going into college. I have a couple clients right now who are going into prestigious schools because they've been so driven, but I constantly tell them to make sure they know what their purpose is, who they are, work on that, pull back so that they can push forward. Cool? All right, let's get into this. I'm pretty excited. You can see I'm pretty jazzed. So, I'm ready. So usually we have to talk about the obvious. What is your unconscious motivation? Just got to start right there. The punch in the face, which is the need to succeed and the need to avoid failure. That's the unconscious motivation of the 3. This is why we give them the title of the performer, the achiever, the doer. The underlying motivation is, I need to be successful or appear to look successful and to avoid failure. Now, the problem with the fear of failure, it makes us less natural. which also and often makes us more likely to fail. Maybe not on the level of what the world thinks, but at a core level, a 3 often knows that their desire to look successful, be experienced that way, can then cause them to put on a phony or fake mask so that they get that affirmation for being successful, which then can put them into a place in which they're getting farther and farther from the success of being who they are, which would be something they could actually utilize pretty well with all of the energy they have to perform. What I mean by that is, when we know who we are and we already have a lot of energy for performance and for success, putting those two together can be a very powerful component. But a lot of 3s outrun their true self, and therefore they're performing, but not performing out of a place of purposefulness. If your fear is, I'm only as lovable as my last success or observable accomplishment, then the accomplishment might trump the purpose. I'm always trying to do that little extra to get love. And I'm image conscious too. Now, I totally relate to this because I am a 4-wing 3 with a hard 3. I've told you that before. So I'm double whammy on image. Double whammy on image. Luckily, my 4 side brings me down enough to that authentic place of knowing that I am double whammied on image. And that I'm pretty ambitious. So it tethers me a bit. Well, for a 3, sometimes they can get inflated like a helium balloon, because the praise they're getting for the accomplishments can really put them in a rut. I was talking to a client of mine who's a 3, who's in his 60s, really successful guy. If he's watching, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. And I really appreciate working with him because he is a hard worker. In his 60s, he is not slowing down, and he is working hard at his business, but now he's putting a lot of the great pieces together of what's unconscious in his life. And so we were talking about a little rut he's been in. And in that rut, he's been having a tough time sleeping, can't really figure out why. It's been a 2-week zone, and clearly worried that this is going to last a very long time, which is a natural thing for a 3, right? I don't want to get stuck. Now for a 4, I'm like, I'm going to tell somebody after a month of not sleeping well, a month of disruption, because I just kind of know that that's been a normal case for me. And when we were talking about it, there was this constant message of, I need to make the best out of the way what the day gives me. Power of positivity. If I put this plan in place, then things should go and work in a linear way. And the problem is, a 3 can sometimes not know how to carry the burden of uncertainty and the unknown. And so they slip back into that power of positivity. And they need to know that the 2 weeks is not the end of the world. This actually might be very informative, might be very helpful, and be teaching you a lesson. Be slowing you down intentionally, your body telling you, slow the fuck down, so I can inform you of the next steps. And so what I inform this client of is, look for the ways in which this period of time is informing you to slow down so that you can take in, so that you can shoot back out. That sometimes the most successful people slow down a bit, pull back. Now you guys, 3s, 7s, and 8s are assertive types. They're always moving to the future. Well, 9s, 4s, 5s, and I'm a 4, right? So we're withdrawing types. We pull back a little bit and take in, then go out. And this is where you guys can learn from us. And I think this is where a 3 can lean into their 4-wing a bit and try to understand how to pull back a little and say, what am I to do with this time? Because I want to outrun it. I want to outrun it with a goal and a result. There is a path to achievement, and I've got to make the best out of this day. And what happens is they actually can get even stuck more, like the person who's stuck in quicksand and is trying to wiggle their way out and actually sinks further in. It's that they can slow down in that time and start actually processing, how can I reach for the right help here because if I struggle too much to get out, I'll get sucked further in. And this is where a 3 can actually get more relational and interactive. The goal is accomplishment and prestige. And that's how I measure my success. Just like a 2 in relationship is satisfied when they are feeling connected in the relationship. And the 4 is feeling satisfied when they are being their most authentic self. But the mix of that is actually pretty powerful. It's a relational component of the 2. It's an authenticity of the 4, and it's an accomplishment of the 3. And when you put those together, it can make that heart center really productive. And that's where those 2 wings would be working for you guys. But it's not all about just productivity in that moment. It's about actually relationship and authenticity. Starting with yourself. Move into what can I look at in myself here so that I can accomplish and achieve well, not just accomplish and achieve. Leaving your mark, having grand ambitions, not undershooting is really great, but don't be dull. There is a dull security in success. Success can really make people boring as hell because they're getting some jobs done, but they're not really doing it with a certain type of ownership of who they are and a relational component. So what a 3 has to do is diminish the extrinsic motivation and get a bit more intrinsic. Generate from within, build an interior world, get more and more intrinsic so that when they do work externally, they're coming from a lot of the juice that's in here. And they might have to do a lot of that work in solitude and not get a bunch of affirmation and praise, and do it in silence of world applause. And that might be actually where you become most successful. I know when I'm trying to lead a 3, sometimes it's just incentivizing them. Here's a new a reward for you. Here's a new title. Here's something you could put on your resume. Because you guys want something that's quantifiable to prove your success. But the quality shit is internal, and you'll have to go there, and you'll have to be afraid and stand alone, and maybe even need support. Deal with your fear of not getting a certain thing for a certain amount of time so that you can actually structure and produce something a bit more authentic internally. Now, I'm going to be emphasizing this throughout our time together, is that the 3 has to pull back a little bit to get really in tune with what drives them and what they love, what they like in life, what makes them come alive in their doing. Because otherwise you're going to wake up at the end of your life and go, what the hell was that all for? What was it all for? So chasing success can be vague. I've seen so many 3s who are super successful that don't really even love what they do. They're just found a way to be good at it. And they're not reflective enough in their approach towards success that they become disoriented along the way, and in the later part of their life have to really reckon with this emptiness that's inside. That the accomplishments didn't fill up enough. There's not enough people clapping at the end when I'm old and my knees don't work and my hip needed to be replaced. So you'll find that a lot of great successful leaders will tell you that self-awareness is usually one of the greatest indicators of success, to knowing yourself well, to leaving room to create you. Leaving room to create you. find out what really makes you tick. And that requires us not to just grow high like a redwood. I always talk about the redwood because I love the root system. They're majestic, but their roots go out 50 to 100 feet wide, not deep, wide, and grab onto a whole bunch of other things and intertwine. They become rooted in the system, in social connections, in themselves, and they find things that they love underneath the ground that sustain them. You're already going to be a fucking redwood. It's beautiful to look at and majestic. But I hope at the end of your life, you can look back and say, I did the things that brought me alive. One of the most powerful quotes, and I quote this so often with clients in videos, is from Carl Jung, who is my favorite psychologist of all time and often quoted. A lot of the words you use today, if you don't know about Carl Jung, came from Carl Jung. He's one of the most innovative psychotherapists ever. And somebody at the end of his life asked him, what was your pilgrim's progress? Essentially, what was the journey you went on and what did you really learn at the end? And he said, in my case, my pilgrim's progress consisted of my having climbed down 1,000 ladders until I could reach out my hand to the little clod of earth that I am. What he's saying there is, I had to walk down 1,000 ladders of my ego, of my self-importance, of my ambition, of my need to succeed, to realize that I am ultimately dirt. It's a fucking heavy message. And so I hope at the end of your life you felt like you did the things you loved and that you can go away having succeeded in being you really well. Carl Jung goes on to say this, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. He who looks outside dreams. She who looks inside awakens. Just throwing pronouns there to get you both in there, and the theys and thems, but look inside to awaken something deep within yourself so that you can produce well. And yes, you'll get some affirmation and success from that, and people will really value you. But they'll value you because you know you well. And then you put that work that you already were going to do anyway, because you're a 3, that's not going to stop, towards something very meaningful. Cool? We have to admit to ourselves that we are admiration junkies. There is an addiction to admiration that goes on through our blood. And part of what we have to do to work through that a bit is to have almost a disambition. I don't mean not working hard, but being more conscious of that excessive part of ourselves that is looking for praise from other people. And what this requires of us is to be a bit more amused by ourselves. What I mean by that is that can we enjoy ourselves enough that we don't have to go get from everywhere this approval? Approval is a tricky word here because people could be approved of many things. For doing many things, for fitting in, for saying the right thing, for being nice. But 3s want to be approved of for their ambition, that they are successful, they get shit done. So that sniffy part of us, the part that sniffs out where to get it, where can we get that gaze? Where can we get that attention? Where can we get that admiration from? Like an anteater sniffing out ants. A 3 will know where to find that gaze, where to get that approval, because there is that approval seeking component. But again, it's not approval for approval's sake. It's approval for what I have done, how well I've done it, and how that comes off to people. I can't overstress enough, or understress enough, or stress enough that the 3 is really fine-tuned to intuit where to get that approval or that admiration consistently. And part of the really ugly component of this is that there is almost a desire to be more admired than loved. And this is where the masks come on. This is where credentials and resumes and the things that I show to you, the things that you see, the shape shifting that I do to suck you in can get really ugly. So the unhealthy 3 can really live in that world in which they're posing too much. You'll notice this quite often. I've found myself doing it, but when I'm with a 3, I really notice it. Especially my good guy friends that are 3s, so we're just together and maybe a woman looks our way. And one of us notices that the 3 instantly thinks that that woman is looking at them. And 2, if it isn't that case, let's just say the woman comes over and starts talking to the other guy, that the 3 will somehow throw a couple moments in there which they reference how they have been admired by women before, just to equal the playing ground. So to be amused by ourselves, we have to sink more into approving of what we're doing. Self-approval, self-admiration, not desperately seeking it everywhere else and then having to put this mask on that then becomes this false self. And in that, we then start conforming. We really do then conform to how people see people. It becomes kind of a base level situation. Now the 4, on the other hand, especially 3s who have a strong 4 wing, will really try to lean more into self, more into authenticity, into originality. And so you might not relate as much because your 4 wing is really strong. But the person who doesn't have as strong a 4 wing will really live in that world of reading the room, of looking for the places in which they are admired or disadmired, and then start shifting to get there. And moving and tweaking. So be conscious of how you do that. In the psychology world, we would call this the defense mechanism of identification. Identification is when we take on a character so that we can present an ideal image to the world, especially what we think other people want from us. So the questions that are going on in our head is, what do you want? What do you want to see from me? How do you want me to present? How do you want me to be seen? And so in identification, we over-identify with an image that we think is ideal. And what happens there is we start to get confused about who we are. And this is where the true self, false self battle is really waged. It is super hard to find out who your true self is. It's a lifetime work. And for many 3s, they've been working so hard against the true self. Always wanting to present well, so shelving lots of authentic parts of themselves, these components that if we don't find out what they are, we live a bit trapped. Performing, doing that hard work of pleasing others by performing well and getting cheap applause. So your sense of self or your definition of self is heavily influenced that way, and therefore it just keeps on getting pulled away from the true self. So notice when your image quest, because again, us 2, 3s, and 4s, I'm with you guys. We're image questers, we're image journey folks. We're looking to present a certain way and get affirmation from that. But if we go on that image quest too long and without disruption, we become phony. So the 3 has to get authentic and honest with themselves. What do I really want? What, as I said before, am I enjoying it just about myself without others having to enjoy me for it? And if you just notice a little bit that you're spinning the script too much. You're crafting the resume too much. You know, you're a resume crafter, a script spinner, a narrative twister. You're going to know that that authentic self is being disconnected. And you will have to fight for it to get it back. So if you keep on hearing yourself when your friend is talking and you are then having to one-up them even in your head, which isn't necessarily a wrong thing if you're self-aware about it and you can diffuse it. You'll probably be doing that on your deathbed. You'll be comparing yourself to the person in the deathbed next to you and trying to one-up them, being competitive with them. I don't care if you do that as long as you know you're doing it and then you don't act upon it. But if you were with a friend and you find yourself wanting to one-up, get in tune with that. And if you are with a person and you're trying too hard to shape shift for them, get in tune with that. I think about the song, the Peter Gabriel song, In Your Eyes. It was a song that was popular when I was young. It's still one of those like kind of, I don't know, easy to throw into a movie songs to really pull at the heartstrings. But here's some of the lyrics. In your eyes, the light, the heat, I am complete. The resolution. Like, we are looking into the eyes of someone else and trying to find that completeness. It's that Jerry Maguire, like, you complete me thing. But there is this, like, affirm me. Tell me that I'm doing well. That's the resolution. But the movement of the song goes to this. Love, I get so lost sometimes. Days pass and this emptiness fills my heart. So there's an emptiness there for the lover, but in this case, for the admirer of your success. When I want to run away, I drive off in my car, but whichever way I go, I come back to the place you are. The grand facade so soon will burn. So the facade will burn off. Without a noise, without my pride, I reach out from the inside. So this is that connection to self. The enjoyment of self actually makes this person a better lover and a better connector to this other. The relationship becomes more complete because this person is looking inwards, not outwards, and therefore connecting more. Did I just break down Peter Gabriel? Probably is not exactly what he was trying to go for, but I put my own psychological spin on it, made it some solution to a problem of admiration junkies. All right, let's move the fuck on. I was out to dinner recently with my friend who's a 3, and I am a 4, and we both have a good amount of image consciousness going on. He's a 3-wing 4, I'm a 4-wing 3, and I was sitting up against the wall. I kept on seeing him looking at the wall. Like, what the hell is he looking at? And of course, it just hit me. There's gotta be a mirror there. And I looked to my left and there was a mirror right there, and he kept on looking at himself in the mirror. Classic 4 move. We have to remember, 4-wing 3s, 3-wing 4s, that we are double image conscious and that we are just like this in the solar system. We are a speck of dust in a solar system, but yet we feel like we are the solar system sometimes. We carry this image consciousness more deeply than other folks. 3s, 2s, and 4s should live in that image consciousness world. So we will at times be tempted to conform and sacrifice a bit of who we are to get love, especially the 3s. You might start to devalue things and then prioritize other things to get that attention. How do I get success here? How can I stir your emotions with my image? And what we have to do, and I think this is what 4s are pretty good at, so here's where you can lean on your 4 wing, is 4s kind of have death built into them. From an early age, they kind of have an understanding that death is part of life and that there is some kind of movement of life, death, life. I've talked about that before, where there is kind of a thing that comes to the surface and then we need to break down a bit to be redeemed and rebuilt. And fours understand this pretty well. Threes can miss it sometimes. And as William James says, that at the core, the worm is at the core of life, and the worm is death. It's always with us. And until we start integrating it, we don't know how to properly grieve things, including our physical body, our decaying, our getting older, I'm sorry to say. Being human is a burden, and threes will try to fight this with image. And so you have to practice death a bit. I was just in Italy when I was in Switzerland also, and I got a tattoo on my leg that says practice death. And it comes essentially from this Socrates quote that says, "Those who are true philosophers practice for death and dying." They are, in a sense, their work is to help people walk through the difficult parts of life, to stop striving so much, to spiritually let go and let go of the fear of not being enough. To actually be okay with being a bit displeasurable and not be so dependent on a response. Now, as a four, I know this. I want to be adored. I know I want it. And sometimes that's the difference between a four and a three, is the four knows they want to be adored, the three sometimes doesn't. They're not self-aware enough. So I just want to highlight this for you guys, to get in tune with your desire to be adored. And this is where we can start competing with others, to upstage them so that we can get that attention. The false self is the man I want to be, but who doesn't really exist, because God doesn't know that person. The universe does not know this person, because the universe or God knows what is the true self. And we are creating a false self. And so we have to get in tune with what the universe or God knows is the real self. When you are deeply offended for not being worshipped enough, you have to realize that's a deep insecurity. And this is the sharp edges of our ego that need to be lopped off or grinded at, so that our arrogance, our feeling that we are bigger than we are, is pushed back against. Now, the four-wing three and the three-wing four are some of the most complicated combos. I just want to go into this real quick because they are, again, that double image-oriented character, and they can be very self-involved, different than a three-wing two, which might actually try to give to others. The other two are a little bit more creative, but also a little bit more self-involved. So there is this tug of war too with them. There's this part of them that says, "Here I am, world, look at me." And then, "Don't look at me." It's fire and water. It's like, "Look at me, don't look at me," that type of person. Because the four part says, "Be authentic, only be looked at because you are unique." And the three part says, "Look at me because I am successful." And there is this kind of tug of war there, if they're a strong three-wing four or a strong four-wing three, that there is this push and pull happening. That the one wants to be admired and seen on a public stage, and the other one also does, but says, "For the right reasons. Don't look at me if it's not for the right reasons." So we fours don't want to be objectified. There is this kind of like, "Please screw me because I'm good looking, but only if you really like my personality." And the three is a little bit more like, "Screw me because I'm doing so well." And there is this rub that happens. So think about this, you people with hard threes or hard fours, of how difficult it is to think about others, to make yourself smaller so that others can magnify. And I don't mean this in like diminishing your power, but actually enhancing your power by caring about others more. Mom and dads who are threes, I challenge you to be careful with your children to not pass on that image consciousness to them too much. You'll find that image conscious people want to make sure the narrative is on their terms. We talked about this with spin doctoring, that you might pass on a message in which your kids are overly conscious of what other people think about them. You'll see this in the religious world too, of like how much air people put on to present a certain image of spirituality and rightness and goodness, and they focus on the external world. And that external work doesn't have the right amount of calories for life. It is first half of life stuff. And you parents who are pushing your kids to do jobs that seem like they'll make a lot of money and bring a lot of attention, lawyers, doctors, politics, engineers. You'll see this in a lot of different cultures. I work with a very diverse group of people, East Asian, Indian, Chinese, a lot of folks who have come to America, their parents came to America and had to work hard to build something, and now they want their kids to reap the rewards, and so better become a lawyer or a doctor, and the kid doesn't want to do that. And so maybe you're even the adult child of a parent who pushed that message on you. Don't pass it on to your kids, and you can change the narrative now. A lot of folks are looking for this extreme story of recovery, of redemption. I made it here, and now I'm going to pass this on to our kids, or Jesus saved me, and now I must present this thing to the world that says his light will shine. Watch out for that message. In second half of life, as you move towards second half of life, the comparison and the competition, which we're going to talk about a bit, must diminish for true self stuff. It's where Kierkegaard says it would be so nice to be the self you want to be, to realize your vocation, your authentic talent, but it is dangerous. It might upset the world. It might upset your parents. Carl Jung says, do not compare, do not measure. No other way is like yours. All other ways deceive and tempt you. You must fulfill the way that is yours. Competition in early life, finding out who you are by tension with others, is not a horrible thing. We have to find confidences. Ambition has to be met with some kind of accomplishment. In any walk of life, including what I'm doing now, there is an edge we need to get to so we can get to the next place, see our power, find personal challenges met with strength and courage, and find our personal value in that. And our image is part of it. But as we move into the second half of life, 40 and on, it must diminish. So I'm going to leave you with this. It's a long quote, but it's from Carl Jung, and he says, it seems to me that the basic facts of the psyche undergo a very marked alteration in the course of life. So much so that we could almost speak of psychology of life's morning, first half of life, first 40 years, and a psychology of its afternoon, that midsection, the second half. As a rule, the life of a young person is characterized by a general expansion and a striving towards concrete ends. And his neurosis seems mainly to rest on his hesitation or shrinking back from this necessity, being afraid, finding your confidence, going after things. But the life of an older person is characterized by a constant contraction of forces. Smaller, like knowing who you are, knowing how to use it, by the affirmation of what has been achieved in the first half, and by the curtailment of further growth. His neuroses comes mainly from his clinging to the youthful attitude, which is now out of season. Meaning, you have to let go of that shit. If you are in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and you're still uber image conscious and competing all the time and trying to one-up people and constantly worried about how people are viewing you, you missed it. You fucking missed it. You have to dig deeper. The second half of life has to be filled with an assuredness of who you are, and then a giving that back to the world. Cool? Whew. Damn. When talking about threes, we always have to talk about productivity potential, and you guys have a ton of productivity potential. I just got back maybe like a month ago from Switzerland. If you've watched other of my videos, you know that I filmed some of these episodes in Switzerland. particularly the 5s and the 1s. And I'm going back in another month. And Switzerland, for me, it was about 3 weeks of crazy amount of productivity up in the Alps. And it had capped off about 3 months of just what I would call functionally bipolar moments in my life. Now, if you have an inner metronome of swinging from crazy amount of productivity to crashes, then you will relate a little bit. But 3s actually are pretty good at maintaining steady production levels. 4s, on the other hand, can go swingy. So that's why I say with 4s, there's a lot of functional bipolar stuff going on. Not very diagnosable in the sense of like, I'm diagnosing you with bipolar, but we can swing into hyper intense, focused energy and then go for a gap of maybe months of not doing that kind of energy again, where I see with 3s, it's pretty steady. And so as a 4 who has leaned into my 3 wing quite often in life, I'm looking at the 3 to understand that optimization, that steady intensity, that ability to just keep the train moving and keep the train at a certain level of speed, where I might actually go into hyperspeed and then just take the train off the tracks for a little while. Now, in that time, as I said to you before in the intro, I got about 400, 500 hours of study, research, filming, coming up with my own ideas, and then delivering it. And I actually posted 20 videos in 1 month. Now that was the culmination of 3 months, but it shows when you can actually lean into your 3 wing, you 4s, or when you 3s actually just stay in that zone, how much you can get done. Now, what I think is going to be a struggle for you, which isn't as much for the 4s, is to find your creative juices there. Not just be producing, but be producing with creativity and inspiration. Sometimes the 3 could be achieving so much, producing so much, that it isn't as inspired. So that's not the case always, but it's something for you to look at. Also, how can you do more, achieve more, do less? Now, of course, most of you will still then use that time to achieve more. But studies actually say that 45 hours of work a week is the right amount of work towards completion and also energy resilience, in a sense, for the long haul. After that 50 hours, the worker will start to regress. So it's a thing to think about for you 3s, in which you're trying to produce, and then you go that 70, 80 hours. And this is true of people in corporations, people starting their own businesses, people, CEOs, whatever, but it's also true of you moms, of you dads, who are just putting in so much energy and wanting to stay in that zone. And actually, there's a regression even in your parenting. Because you have overcommitted, you're actually putting too much pressure on your kids. So you have to ask, where is the switch off? You know, for 3s, a lot of times we're wondering where's the off button for you guys? Because your stamina is a superpower. It truly is. You guys can rip it and grip it, and when you're stressed, also you just tend to work more. It's a salve for you. It's a balm for you. Where some other people, they just crash. Raina Marie Rilke said that everything is gestation, then bringing forth. So like an incubation period. And there is that idea of trusting the slow work of the universe, or trusting the slow work of God. That when we slow down, some of what we do can be infinitely more impactful. And that requires, emotional hydration, spiritual hydration, sleep and exercise, and, watching out for your tech traps, your technology traps, eating well. Those things that fuel you and fuel your spirit, and also fuel creativity. So 3s can often be ignorant and ignore some of the things that are vital to their best work. You guys are from the competency triad. That's the ones, the threes, and the fives. And some of the things that are similar for you guys are you're goal-oriented, you're achievers, you're workaholics. You're able to shelve feelings for productivity. And in that task-oriented personal progress sense, you're trying to move forward and you all have a hard time chilling out. Now, threes are great at being goal-oriented and cutting corners. You guys know how to get to the next place in the fastest way. Where fives become the experts. They're data gatherers. They're taking in a lot of information. They become that expert in that area and they get a lot of worth from that. Now, ones obey the rules. They improve themselves. They get it right. So there's a rigidity to their activity. There's a perfection in their orientation. But all three bounce between like systemization and not giving too much into the full system. And that's where I ask you threes to lean into a little bit, is not being too structured and thinking askance, like having an obtuse way you look at things sometimes, like a four-wing. This is where you can really lean into your four-wing, where you can see the world from different angles and not just the one that looks best to people. Let's just jump into a little bit of this idea that I talked about before, where we at the end are going to be dirt. It's the same in sex, for example. You might see a beautiful person from afar and they're all done up and they look really good. And once you guys are naked, there is an equality at some level. And once you have both come to fruition in your relationship in that night or that day or that morning, there is a taking down of the pedestal you've put the person on, because now you are just two naked souls that have been relieved of a lot of energy. And I think that threes actually have to think about life that way. What does it look like post-ejaculation or post-orgasm? When your energy has been sucked from you a little bit, and there's a refractory period, there's kind of like a getting your energy back, in which you actually become pretty rational and a lot more, or a lot less idealistic. This can actually help threes if they kind of orient their mind this way, meditate on this, and contemplate on this. Take some of that image consciousness away and focus their energy on the right place to put both creativity and also time. Systems and not systems, structure and a looseness in which they can be a bit more free to get the best work out of themselves with the most inspiration. Now, of course, I'm a four, so I'm coming from that angle, but you guys can really lean into your four-wing, just like I had just leaned into my three. Now, when your wings are balanced, like I think I was for that time, that last 3 months in which I was just producing. I was also studying. My five-wing was really engaged. So you might look at how your two-wing could be more engaged too. And that's where I think more of the compassionate, empathetic, world-saving component of your work can be engaged. Cool? So keep producing, but also know when to have the train stop at the train station and just chill a little bit and get revived. When we are talking about threes, or almost any of the image conscious folks, twos, threes, and fours, we have to talk about the 3 C's. That is comparing, contrasting, and competing. It's always deep down in there. Is that person better than me? Does that person have just a little bit more juice? How can I compare and contrast to find myself a little bit higher, and at the same time I feel small and insignificant? And that competing, that battle for the win. I haven't mentioned winning too much here, but that is a component of the threes, is how can I win in this area? How can I beat this competitor? There's this other thing going on though, and this is that shame-based part that pulls us back down, is that we are split in two. We are gods and we are shit. we are outlawed and we are elected. That's what Carl Jung, somebody said about him in his biography, that he felt himself both outlawed and elect, positioned for a great authority, but also meant to be on the margins. Bruce Springsteen says about Drive, when somebody asked him about Drive, what makes you so driven? And Bruce said, I was told that I wasn't worth dirt, and I was told that I was the second coming of Jesus, and I believe them both, and that's what stirs the fire. That's what pushes me forward. Ernest Becker says this: man is literally split in two. They have an awareness of their own splendid uniqueness in that they stick out in nature with towering majesty. And yet they go back into the ground a few feet in order blindly and dumbly to rot and disappear forever. It is a terrifying dilemma to be in and to live with this painful contradiction. We are dirt, we're just another human. If we're all naked, we're just a bunch of naked people, and there's no glitz and glam, no makeup, no muscles to show, and we're just another human being, another soul. And also, we are a God. And so in childhood of 3, often got praise for accomplishment and started to feel that juice that comes from praise. But there is this emphasis then that starts to happen in their psyche that if I nail it, I will not be ignored. Now, this often happens in a parent dynamic with child, or just the culture of the family. We have to make sure that we concentrate on using our gifts and developing to lift others up. This is what the 6 does pretty well. So this is where you can lean into your 6. Let's all succeed together. Let's be cooperative and non-competitive. Why the 3 is in that more winning competitive nature. So that high side, 6, is a bit more okay with the ordinary, not as flashy, not as flaunty, can support others, see success in supporting others. Now the self-preserving 3 does this a bit more. They almost work against the passion. Well, they do work against the passion. They're counter-passional, or they're the counter type, where humility working against vanity is actually their vanity. If I don't look vain and I look humble, then I'm working against this vanity that's deep inside of me. But that's kind of vain in and of itself, right? It's still vanity is leading. It is ego satisfying to compete and win. But there's a lot of pressure on that. That's why you'll see actually sexual 3s, we're talking about subtypes here, with the self-preserving and the sexual, oftentimes have sexual dysfunction because there's so much at stake in their performance that there is an actual failure to perform. I used the idea of peacocking before, or grandstanding. There is the nature of a 3 who wants to be around other, not only just high-performing folks, but folks that make them look good. And so we have to concentrate on how we're shifting and navigating to get in certain circles. Now, I have a lot of clients who are Ivy League schooled or going into Ivy League schools. I live in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in New York City. So if I'm at the gym, there's folks who have Brown and Harvard and Yale and Williams and all of these high performance school, Princeton. And what you notice when you're around these folks enough, and I am around these folks quite a bit, is that a lot of the navigating in that world is this nepotism, pat on the back. They've surrounded themselves with each other and therefore can level up. You know, it's the tide rises and they all get taken up. This isn't a bad thing. I do this all the time. I actually really enjoy being around high performers. And I find that when we're around each other, there's all these ideas that get created and we want to take each other into each other's worlds. And this is where you see a lot of power couples, a lot of power relationships. And I have some of those in my life in which there's friends that we level up together. This isn't in and of itself wrong, but you better be looking for people of character. People who are prioritizing the right things. And what I see with threes is that they often have tons of acquaintances, but very few life partners. And I don't mean that in the romantic sense, but people that at the end of their life, they can say, gosh, we did life together. So notice talent and notice character and be drawn to that. Be very aware of when you are dropping names. I can do this every once in a while in my neighborhood. There's a lot of famous people who live in this neighborhood, and I'll have a friend visit from out of town, and I'll go, they live there, and they live there, and they live there, and they live there. And there is some kind of bringing attention to myself by the people that surround me. Did I end up in this neighborhood out of mistake? I don't think so. There was a part of me that wanted to be around my people. You ever heard the story of the ugly duckling? It's really a swan that was born into a duck family, and the ducks were telling the swan that it was ugly. But essentially, the swan went out on the road and went from place to place to place to try to find, essentially in an unconscious position, people who were like him. And ultimately, he found other swans, but didn't even notice that they were like him until they all gravitated towards each other. This isn't wrong, friends. It isn't wrong to be given vitality and energized and filling and having life and power be given to you when you acknowledge the people you want to be around. But don't use it as a way to project power or get too vain with it. This is a mission of boredom to do that. It's fucking old and it's cheap. But to be engaged and disregard presentation for actual community is a whole nother thing. And in the capacity of that community, you can shift and change the world. So gravitate towards people that are like-minded and powerful and have the juice you have. But look for the right characters, and also don't disregard characters that don't seem to fit in. Your 9s and 6s of the world, those two that you gravitate towards in weakness and strength, but I would say in weakness and in strength. Look for the weaknesses and strengths of the 9, weaknesses and strengths of the 6, and your wings, weaknesses and strengths of the 2 and 4. Gravitate towards those people who will push back on you and help you become more grounded and full. Not just the other 3s, 7s, and 8s of the world. Cool? All right, so watch your comparison, your competition, and your, there was another one, but it doesn't matter right now. Just watch the C's. I know for myself, it has taken a lifetime to shed comparison and competition. And when you start living in the fullness of who you are, life isn't as much a competition and a comparison component. It is a living fully of how you were made component. It's a totally different game. All right. One of the beautiful things and infuriating things about you 3s is the spin zone, the spin factor that you guys can produce out of nowhere sometimes. That you're great marketers. There's packaging and advertising, branding that you bring to the table. That you can totally frame something well and exaggerate its importance and suck us into wanting that thing. At the same time, you could often overpromise and undeliver or underdeliver. that there is this great first impression, but the spin and the contorting will actually lose people's confidence in you sometimes. And you'll see that often with a 3, there's an inner circle that can definitely disperse from them over time as they see this spin, this transformation of a narrative into what they want it to be for their own self-protection. And that not every failure has to be spun to look good. It doesn't have to be shifted and changed and morphed into a success. Now, a lot of 3s will say, I don't lie, I just remember big, or I remember differently. This builds a mistrust for a lot of people around them. Unfortunately, it doesn't inspire confidence long term. In the beginning, it's sexy and it's inspiring and there's this can-do spirit. But unfortunately also is that the 3s are often not aware that they're even doing this. They're not aware of the promises they're making. They would actually, if you called them to the mat later, not say that they were promises. That, I was just thinking about that thing. I don't know that I was going to do it. And so when we have this optimistic, futuristic orientation towards looking out long term, that sometimes the person that they're talking to or the group that they're talking to, the people that they're talking to, want to know what's going to happen in the present and are also concentrated on how the past has hurt them. And so when this future-oriented person makes some missteps or doesn't follow through appropriately, it builds this lack of confidence. It is okay to not have your shit together. You don't have to constantly be polishing the silverware, polishing and Windaxing the glass so that we don't see the flaws. And you also don't have to have it together all the time in the sense that you've covered all your bases with the thing you're trying to do. 3s can do well with being a little more loose and therefore allow some of the things that would enhance the narrative with actually brokenness or flaws. Like, good stories are stories with a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. But you'll see with 3s is that they'll take a whole history of a thing and change that history to serve the way they think it should have gone, even though it didn't go that way. It's often a deep fear of public humiliation, of embarrassment. That you'll be found out, that you don't have what it takes. And you must have the everyday and the epic swim together. And you will look silly if you do that. But that's how we're all looking out here. It's a little bit silly in life. And that's okay. Because you are silly. You're silly, I'm silly, we're all broken, we're all flawed. And we don't have to constantly grandstand and peacock and hide the shadow behind us that trying to stick some light back there to nullify the shadow. Get more in touch with your shadow. This is what we consider in the psychology world like shadow boxing. Knowing what the things are that you don't want the world to see, and so you've hid, or that you don't know about, and maybe the world knows about. Maybe you need to ask questions because they see it and you don't. And you're losing allegiances because they're seeing it and you're resistant to hearing it. So as that grandstanding and peacocking is going on, know that you are losing folks because we are all born between urine and feces. Think about that. And that is the story of humanity. It's the story of life, death, life. This idea that there is something born, something dies, something comes back and is resurrected. And often, the 3 is trying to bypass death and move right back to life. And that doesn't actually form a great narrative. And you'll ultimately be seen as a huckster, a fraud, and a phony. So watch with the spin factoring. It is pretty cool that you can actually read the room, message things well, become a quick expert of what people's experiences want to be, and therefore shape something. But you have to have enough folks around you who will push back on the polished version you present. Some of those people are 6s, 4s, and 8s. These are considered the emotional honest folks. You know, they will pull you back down to the ground. 4s, for example, 3s will condemn 4s for dreaminess. 4s will condemn 3s for phoniness. You know, it's this idea of make it happen versus making yourself happen. You know, the 4s are about making themselves come to life. The 3s are about making the thing happen, whatever is the goal I have. And a 4 will try to reveal where you're not being authentic. A 3 will try to, or a 6 will try to reveal where there is fear here that you aren't addressing, and they will present it in their own fear. And you might actually try to run over them by not seeing or addressing that fear. 8s will just pound on you for also not being authentic. They'll see where you're trying to be too slick. And an 8's a little bit more up the gut. So bring some of those folks around you so that your natural inclination to polish will be resisted by a couple characters in your life that are showing you the warts and the stains. I've had a lot of leaders that I've come around that I walked away from ultimately saying, they're going to be found out someday. They're trying too hard to put something on this that isn't there. And they're making it a story that the flaw of the story is actually that it doesn't have flaws. You will be found out in time, even if it's just that you find out yourself. So watch out for this. Continue to be a person who can read the room and then present well, especially those things that you want the world to receive. But know that the world is also looking for honesty and authenticity. Cool? So we have to deal with shame. Unfortunately, we have to deal with shame. Shit. 2s, 3s, and 4s. You are in the heart camp. There's some sadness there, and there's also some shame there. So we have a high shame quotient or a low shame quotient. It's hard to tell which one we are, but I guess we deal with shame a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. All 3 don't think we can be loved for who we are. So we project an image to be seen a certain way to get the love we want. Now, every one of the numbers is doing some version of this, but ours shows up in image. And 2s want to be appreciated. 4s, we want to be unique and recognized for our uniqueness, and you 3s want to be admired. It's how we try to fight shame, but it also sticks us into a very big rut, a big valley. I'll ask you this, 2s, 3s, and 4s. When you wake up from a dream, if you remember dreams, do you often wake up in a position of shame? I know I do. As a 4, I wake up from dreams and I know I did something wrong in the dreams, or I was not appreciated or admired or seen as unique or recognized in a certain way in that dream, and it makes me feel really shitty when I wake up, even though it was just a dream. There was something in all three of us that got this message that we are not accepted unless we present this way. Whether that's likable, supportive, unique. And so we have to think about what we pay attention to in our environment. Threes, you're going to probably be paying attention to how people are viewing you and how they're viewing your success. And when you're not feeling sharp about that, the shame will start to creep in. These folks around us are kind of our target for survival. You'll notice that threes, and I think all three numbers do this, but three specifically, can feel that it's all on them. If I don't, who will? So there's a lot of pressure to perform there. They also get dissatisfaction out of performing and getting noticed for performing well. And so they will often have a difficult time saying no. They need to be all things to all people. Now, this can get particularly muddy when there's some spiritual components added to it or religious components added to it. Whatever the religion, leaders in this category will often try to present so well, and then they'll become a person who has to go underground a bit to fulfill some needs because they're presenting so well on the outside. And I've seen threes specifically use religion as a business. You know, growth. I'm inclined to work overtime and maybe a little less on the character stuff and a bit more on the production stuff. And I'm getting all of this acclaim for being such a good fill in the blank, whatever the religion or the spiritual presentation is. So watch out for how you'll shift the shame into production and run from the shame. I think maybe fours and twos a little bit more likely to lean into the shame and notice it a bit. Fours specifically, twos secondarily. But for you guys, you threes, there's these achievement dumps that could actually lead towards shame because you're kind of left a little dry. And also, if you notice yourself well enough, if you're self-aware enough, you'll notice achievement trumps. There's moments where you're trying to trump others, get on top, compete, be the winner. And if you're self-aware enough, you'll be aware of the shame in that too. Because you'll know you're often being wearing a mask. And then you're going to come back to that question going, who am I? Was this just about the winning, or was this about some kind of deeper purpose? Do I really know what I'm good at, or am I just good at being productive? So resisting the things that will suck you into some kind of cyclone of keeping busy but not keeping true to yourself. And so sometimes shame can actually help us know what spots we need to work on, what spots we need to grow in. Twos, threes, and fours, we are constantly putting on a presentation for different reasons, and there's different blends of it with the wings, but there is a presentation to the world that we are giving. And we will hold to this and really hunker down and often double down when we feel compromised or threatened. So we become even more of that image, more false, more phony. Especially you threes, it can be candy coated, can look really good. And so as you grow, as you become more self-aware and accept more of who you are, and what I mean by that is accept the things that have been part of your desires, your passions, the things you've loved throughout time, the things that you really gravitate towards, that you're wondering, will other people accept me for being into this stuff? Or if I really go down this path, can I really make this work if I really follow my true passions? As you do that, you can start shedding and unclothing yourself from the cloak of presentation and accept more of who you are, and shed the dream of what you want people to see you as for the reality of what you really are. C.S. Lewis says this: I have found out ludicrous and terrible things about my character, sitting by watching the rising thoughts as they pop up. One of every 3 is a thought of self-admiration. I catch myself posing before the mirror, so to speak, all day long. And when you force yourself to stop it, you admire yourself for doing that also. Shame fuels compulsivity. We want to move out of that shame, and so even a 4 might be compulsively depressed when they get shameful. A 3 is likely to twist and turn that upside down and make it really glossy and fashion it in a way that is really presented well. We're all trying to fill an intimacy vacuum, though. And shame loves darkness and isolation. But for 3s, you have to watch out. The way you escape the darkness and isolation is by fluffing things up, by making them look better than they are. So where a 4 might kind of go into a crevasse and get stuck there, a 3 will try to make the darkness light, make the isolation connection. But they might actually be further putting themselves into a place of darkness and isolation. What can I offer if not action, a 3 says. Doing, achieving. But that can push them further and further into the abyss. Now, you might not even know you're in it, because you have found a way to see the world as shiny, as something that's, gonna be seen as bright one day. I'm gonna make it better than it is today. Every day is an opportunity to do something better. It's just like all these fucking phony cliches that you throw out might actually be putting you further into a place in which you're not aware of you, meaning you're not self-aware. If I sit with a 3 long enough and ask them, why did you do this thing at your dinner table? Whatever it be. Let's just say that they were trying to make somebody laugh. We'll get down to the idea that if I didn't make that person laugh, I would actually have to deal with sitting with myself in the possible uselessness of me, which would take me to that darkness and isolation. But wouldn't it be better to actually know how to sit in that place and just be okay with yourself? To not overly be concerned about what people think of you. How are you doing? When you're resistant to that everyday kind of silence and solitude, you'll miss the bigger picture. Yes, you will keep producing, and you'll probably produce well. But at the time of your death, will that production be as important as the time you could have spent becoming more whole? That's the question. And many 3s will answer, no, I just want to fucking produce. And I get it. So this is what you'll have to wrestle with. And you'll have to decide if there's redemption in the pulling back a bit, understanding your shame more, because the shame is usually trying to inform you about who you are at a health level. If we use those inklings inside that say you're disconnected from yourself, you're disconnected from the universe right now. That's kind of what shame is about. It's kind of saying there's a disconnection going on. It's not just to punish you, it's to help you understand, like, there's something that is disconnected here. And can you connect to it? I hope you can. Yes, we have to talk about feelings, folks. 3s, I'm sorry to do this. We have to engage the emotions. You have to learn them and be present to them. Sadly, many of my 3 clients have had to suffer me in many ways through the years, but next to my couch, I have a sheet of paper that has 5 rows, and in each row is one key emotion word, and then words to actually express that word. So if somebody says to me that they're angry, well, that could mean that there are 1,000 different types of anger. You can find a very particular word. So those 5 categories for me are anger, happiness, sadness, confusion, and fear. And in every category, I have about 100 words, maybe 50 words, that describe that core experience. So let's just take happiness, for example. You might be energized, you might be loved, you might be assured, relieved, you might be respected, pleased. Happiness is just a category. Anger, you might be peeved, you might be rage-filled. 3s have a difficult time naming feelings. They're moving too much. And so I find that 3s are really good at compartmentalization, where like a 4, for example, is not as good at compartmentalizing. We actually have to work at it. And we all live in like a kind of shame zone, 2, 3s, and 4s, which is a type of sadness. It's a type of loss. And 3s underdo and avoid emotion, specifically sadness. What I want to convince you of is that feelings will make you more efficient. They will make you, in a sense, faster, jump higher, lift more. That it is a type of intelligence that if you gain a hold of, you can really key in more and more to the areas that you want to benefit the world. There is a cost of denying emotions and restraining them, holding them back, putting them in little drawers. So I want to diminish your fear of emotion and also diminish your fear of people's emotion in front of you. To weather the storm of their emotions. To sit with a broken person and be okay. And not feel that it's just a tax or a toll on your time. And in that also relying on humans. Leaning into them. Needing them even. And allowing them to support you when, if there is an actual time that you have an emotional experience that you need some help from, that you go and get it. My problem with 3s, and with myself at times, because again, I'm a hard 3 wing, is that there is a water skimmy experience, like a water skimmer, like that little bug. They're above the surface, and they're beautiful to watch. But they can't go underneath the water, so there's a certain depth they never get to. So why it's fun to watch them move around really quick and perform all these tricks on the water, their depth doesn't match the sexiness that's on top of the water. The assertive types, the 7s, 8s, 3s, you guys are often moving so quickly to the future that what happens is you miss a lot of the emotional experiences going on in the present and also running from the past, that you can't call on or utilize emotion that would actually minister to people and minister to you. And it's a cruel punishment for yourself and for others to diminish this part of your experience. So you have to get into that 101 type shit. Emotional check-ins, what am I feeling right now? Convincing yourself that there is emotional health in actually exploring emotions. That's where you will become emotionally healthy, and therefore your business, your job, your experience with the things that you want to perform well in will actually have more layers to them, will be deepened. And you will avoid some blind spots, because if I look at most 3s, when they are struggling, and even when their businesses are struggling or their work is struggling, it's because of some relational breakdown. Something related to their emotional stuntedness is actually creating an inefficiency. You don't become less efficient when your emotions are engaged. It's just not true. And you might have to work with them a little bit to understand them, and there might be a learning curve, and that might slow you down a bit. Truth. The emotions may have to bubble to the surface. Many threes avoid emotion by staying busy. They're actually quite afraid of emotion and letting them rule them. But you are efficient folks. You will find a way to learn how to integrate the emotion. You might need to get some help with that. See it as actually something of a challenge, something that might excite you. Now I know threes want to be good at the thing that they go after. So if you are not good with emotions, it might freak you out a little bit. But there is time for your feelings. And then it will allow you to be a better leader, a better producer, because you will be more aware of other people's emotions. I know it feels like a distraction. And it might be experienced as difficult to work well when you are, quote unquote, distracted by these emotions. But I can promise you, having done a lot of hard work and having that really strong three wing, that it has allowed me to hone in and focus on what really pleases me and what I think is core to me in my work and in my passion. And that leads towards more purpose. And the problem with a lot of threes is they're really good workers, but they often don't know what the hell their purpose is. They've substituted hard work as their purpose instead of purpose as their purpose. Muting your emotions are diminishing your possibilities. Things are going into your unconscious that need to be conscious. So think about the possibilities that are available to you with more emotional intelligence. The bigger you stuff, the stuff underneath the water, down deep. All myth, all fairy tale, all great stories have the hero having to go, in a sense, underground, into the wilderness, into the forest, under the water, into the valley, through hell, to get to more of the core stuff. And you can preempt a major fall by starting to get less restrictive on your emotions and engage and foster a relationship with your emotions. To reconnect with those, you have to be a bit conscious of this do first, think second, feel third mentality. This can help you integrate a bit of the emotional subterranean stuff. You must make friends with this. And this is where you can lean into your 9 a little. Now, 9s have a tough time knowing what they feel too, but they have a good time slowing down a bit. And as you slow down, the part of you in the 2, 3, 4 camp, which are heart-centered folks, you'll naturally engage the heart. A 9 has a bit more trouble because they're gut-oriented. And they have a tough time knowing what their emotions are. They also have to really engage the emotions and identify where they're at in a moment. But they're better at chilling than you guys and relaxing and going from doing to being. So you can build the gap by leaning into this 9 part of yourself and in a sense, like, hate yourself a little bit for hanging out, but that's okay. Don't underappreciate what can get done in hanging out. Like, in 2 or 3 weeks from now, I'm going to Switzerland for 3 weeks and not working. Now, I'll be working on this kind of content, but I'm doing it to get some of the distractions of work and making money and building my business to build another business, which is the creative zone, content. How can I deliver messages to you if I'm too busy? If I'm too active, I've got to go chill somewhere to let the creative juices bubble up to the surface. So slowing down will help you pick up on emotions that will engage the very core parts of your doing self. And that's creativity. That's relational components that bring you closer to what other people want, not how other people see you. Cool? Well, it'll have to be, because that's all I got. You threes are the great forecasters. You strategize towards that future. I see what I want. I have a goal. I am going to get there. And you look at the past as something that is not too worth spending too much time on. And therefore, you guys, the weakness of it is that you're not great self-reflectors. In a sense, you can be kind of boring. Now, I hate to say that because threes look really flashy and sexy and are polished up, but as we talked about before, those who are most successful in business and in their careers and in their parenting seem to be the most self-aware people. And when anybody is too future-oriented, your sevens, your eights, your threes, and there are threes are concentrated on appearance over substance, not fully, there's a spectrum here, right? But if you haven't asked the question, who am I? And the bigger existential questions, then you might not have the type of meaning that is actually interesting. Great workers, great producers, great organizers, but a little square. Viktor Frankl, who suffered in a concentration camp, said this: when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasures. Now, you might be thinking of sevens here, but the pleasures of work, the pleasures of staying busy are compulsive, and they keep you from you. So when you're always trying to be first at something, you're often not first at being you. It's so hack. It's so cheesy the way I said it, but it's kind of true. Like Kierkegaard said, you have to submit to the necessary in yourself. To become aware of that, the self you are is a perfectly definitive something. And so it is the necessary thing. It is isolating, burdening, torturesome, sometimes feels self-absorbed, task-oriented to know yourself, to daring to be an individual, to separate yourself and go beyond. You must fail at things big. You threes have to fail quite a bit to be led to the limits of your resources. So the answer to life, in a sense, is getting deeper internal. And there is no dead ends. There's no place you can't go beyond. But you will be led to powerlessness. As Richard Rohr says, experiencing the profound power of powerlessness is where things can be revealed. Trust in the blueprint that was created internally before you were out of the womb and move towards that something. What we have to do in that, though, is carry the weight of the unknown. And so I'm ending here to just give you this, hopefully, inspiration, minister and foster that part of you that is very unique. And if no one sees it, that you are still okay. If it isn't manifested in the perfect way, you are still okay because you see it. Buy into a bit of yourself. I'd like to sell you on yourself, not just sell you on your performance. As you grow older, this is throughout the wisdom culture and the sage world, the spiritual world of the wisdom givers, they know that as you grow older, as your libido slows, you must turn inwards. Your life energy must go from being presenter and performer to beer, not just a doer. And you need to limit your focus on the outside rewards and distractions and attentions, and start giving more attention to the inside. The ancient dissection of stories had three parts, three different levels. The mundane, just the basics of a story. Two, to apprehend and learn the art of the story. And then three, can it reach into the soul? That there is a third part of hearing a story, from the mundane to the art of it to the soul of it. To hear how it will guide and deepen your knowledge about yourself. That's soul hearing. And that stuff can only be half understood. It takes a lifetime to learn. But it is a punishment to self, and you are underappreciating the deeper parts of yourself if you don't go to these depths. So I'm challenging you at the end here to not be boring. You can be boring if you are just concentrated on the doing. But when you integrate the being, threes have such a power to be extraordinary. So, that's my challenge to you. I'll end here. My name is Drew. Thank you for being on the journey. Get in touch with me if you need to do any individual work. Like I said before, please subscribe. Subscribing helps because I'm going to keep on pumping out content, and hopefully it will be powerful for you. As I always say at the end of all of these, everything is yet to be done. Everything. In the words of Raina Marie Rilke. Thank you for being with me, guys. I really appreciate it. Have a good one.